I'm Debbie Travis.
And I'm Tommy Smythe.
And this is Trust Me, I'm a Decorator.
Hello, everyone. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce a friend of mine who is also a true multi-hyphenate. She is an author, a presenter on the incredible show, The Social. She is a mother. She is a sex educator. This is the multi-hyphenate Cynthia Loyst.
Oh, my goodness. How are you guys?
So happy to have you.
I'm just picking myself up off the floor with the word sex educator.
Well, it's going to be a fun conversation because I've heard you guys. You get racy, frisky.
We're very sexually educated.
Well, yeah, speak for yourself. I've learned more from Tommy than I think I have for 30 years of marriage. But yeah, Cynthia, it's amazing to have you. And there is a subject I want to get on later with you about, because I'm in the middle of something here, not personally, but with a lot of women at the moment, which is a kind of stress and meltdowns and burnout. But let's talk happy stuff like Tommy's sex life first.
I mean, there's nothing happy about it at the moment. But Cynthia, I wanted to start off a little bit with a bit of backstory about us and how we became friends, because it is a little known fact, which I often brag about, that I was a fake guest on The Social when The Social was in rehearsals at Bell Media in the very, very, very beginning of that show. So I've known you since before The Social even started.
That's right.
And I remember being a part of that and thinking to myself, and that was the first time I'd met you in person. And I remember thinking to myself, this is such an extraordinary group of women. And I thought going in, oh, it's going to be like The View. It was nothing like The View because it was such a unique set of female perspectives. And the idea that it was about, current events, I mean, that had been done a lot of times in a lot of formats, but there was something that felt incredibly special about this. And we did the craziest things. Like we were trying out concepts and ideas. Like, do you remember there was like a Pictionary thing that we did where somebody somebody drew a penis, might have been me. It was so much fun. And I thought, wow, this is definitely going to go. And it was because of you and your cohorts.
Well, I'm glad you had that feeling because I can tell you, I remember that. First of all, I remember we were upstairs on that weird
in the little studio. Yeah.
That was intended to be our studio. And then at some point in time, an executive was like, no, we got to go bigger. And so thankfully they did that and they moved us downstairs. But I remember you and you were so kind. But I, at that time, was so caught in my own head. I think all of us had no idea what this show was going to be. We were sort of calling it the Canadian version of The View. We didn't know each other that well. But when we'd done our first audition, it was actually that format, those exact personalities, the 4 original hosts. And you could tell there was a kind of chemistry and electricity and a difference of opinions that had real potential. But I remember doing interviews on the lead up for that show and going like, I don't know what this is. And I felt the most out of water because the other women were very much familiar with doing on air. And I think am unique and I continue to be a bit of a weirdo in this space in that I'm not a natural extrovert. I'm actually, I lean introvert, which I think is kind of unusual for someone who is in the public eye. I'm an ambivert, right? So I get I enjoy people, I enjoy being out in the world, but I also need to recover from that experience where some people, Debbie, I think you're like this. I think you feed and you I can feel it from you. You are a natural born entertainer, I would say.
And a lot of people think if you like that, you're an extrovert. And they think that you have this kind of power energy, but they don't see when you collapse. I think they think because all people see is what you're doing. They don't see you in your pajamas, in
the fetal position.
In the fetal
eating.
Go away and leave mommy alone. She's on the gym.
That's right.
But, I think they don't see all that. And sometimes that's a bit of an issue today because we're just looking at the rosy stuff and you think all these women can cope. But actually, I remember I was on Marilyn's show and being called upstairs and the big top honcho producer there actually asked my opinion And she told me that this show was coming, and she actually had a picture of each one of you on her desk. And I said exactly what Tommy's just said, but, oh, not The View though, is it? And she said, well, no, not really. It's not really the direction we want to go in. And I said, what about Loose Women, which is the British version of, and everybody from Sharon Osbourne to, there's so many well-known Brits are on that show, and they rotate them a lot and everything. And I remember pointing at a picture of you and going, oh, she looks nice. So yeah, I know you got the job, I'm sure.
Oh, God bless.
I think it steered more to Loose Women, didn't it? Rather than the political side.
I think so. Although you wouldn't know at the time, like based on our photos, Jan Arden, who I know has been on your podcast, and she's a dear friend as well. And she often said when she first saw the lineup of photos, she was like, oh my God, what is this? The tight dress and the big hair show? And it's true. When I look back at those early photos, I was like, oh, we were all just trying to figure out who we wanted to be, I think, and what this show would become. And I do think we found over the years, it really has become this feminist show where we've laughed and we've cried, and there's been stories shared of abortion. We've caused major controversy in the Canadian media scene when we talked about hockey and some of the problems with hockey before they became known. So in this, 11 seasons, I feel like we've really, really established ourselves as this show that is for women and men. Actually, just the other day, I was at a spa and this man came up to me, and I'm always surprised. It's always the men who actually go out of their way in the grocery store to be like, I like your show. This man in particular said, and I really appreciated this. He said, I learn so much about women from watching your show.
Oh, that's nice.
Wow. Big compliment. It's always been something that's fascinated me about The Social and about all of you who have been hosts over the years of The Social, that since you went on air with that show, cancel culture has become out of control. It is so scary for people who are in the public eye. Every time somebody who is a Canadian, public person says something that is attacked in that sort of cancel culture way, I get text messages from other well-known people that I know just saying, Jesus, this is I'm next, because when you speak your mind.
And you have to.
And when you have a show that's actually calibrated and set up so that you are supposed to speak your mind, you open yourself up to this kind of thing. And I will say, over the course of the 11 seasons, I have 3 times written letters of support for various hosts. I won't say who they are because let's not dig up any of that anymore, to multiple executives at Bell Media, because I have just always felt that it is hypocritical as an executive branch of a big company like that to ask these women to go on this show and speak their minds and then participate in attacking them when they do. We are all entitled to our opinion. We live in a democratic society. Whatever your opinion is, it matters and it should be heard. And that's all these things are. But what a scary climate that you have all existed in within that period of time, within those 11 seasons. And I applaud you. I so respect that you still get up every day and you're asked for your opinion and you give it. And that is hard in this climate, I think.
Do they give you guidelines of how far you can go and what you can and can't say?
Well, yeah, swear words for sure. I'm surprised how few F-bombs, have slipped out over the seasons because we are all quite truck driver mouths on our off time. But what happens is that every morning we get together and we've already pre-seen sort of some of the pitches. We've submitted our own pitches, and then we have a sort of meeting around a table where we talk about the topics of the day. And they can range from really heavy-hitting political discussions to, sort of more gossip angles to relationships. Like they run the gamut. And we sort of hash out what we might say, where we might go. And then we also submit notes. So it's pretty clear where we're going in any given conversation, but then it's live television. So things might be written down in bullet point in your notes, but then they might take a different shape when they actually come out of your mouth. So, and that depends on the inflection and it depends on the passion behind it that can all, make an impact in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's not always what you're saying, as we know.
Yeah, I think the thing in television is you can't please everybody all the time, or you just get brown mush, and that's often the way it's going now. And I actually remember, I've been on your show a lot and love it.
Oh, you talked about Meghan Markle.
Oh, shut up. I wasn't going to bring it up. So they said, we were all online, weren't we? Because it was COVID. And they said, will you come in? Because it was just exploding. And I know one of your colleagues is not a monarchist and is quite venomously against them. And that's fine. Half of Britain is, but and I'm not a monarchist, but I do like the pomp and ceremony. So I said to the producer, sure, I'll talk about anything, because your show is really like an open book. And then I wrote in the email, the only thing I really don't want to talk about is because she was in it was just exploding all the bad stuff. I think she just left and whatever. And then I thought, no, delete that. I'm not going to say that. They're never going to ask me that. First question, what did I think? So of course it's like plugging me in, as Tommy well knows. And I will tell you. And there was this deathly quiet on the other end. And because I couldn't really, we weren't in the live studio, you couldn't glare at me or nudge me and stuff. And I just went for it. And Tommy has heard me.
I'm just going to interrupt and say, this is a banned subject, even within Debbie's own family. Her children will not allow her to speak about it, and nobody brings it up. Like if you bring it up around
to
Debbie's...
the extent at Christmas, because at Christmas, how you can very much go down a rabbit hole of, suddenly everybody having a lovely Christmas dinner and then slam doors and nobody speaking. I mean, that's family life, right?
So for me, exactly.
Because my children have grown up and, I'm not like you seeing them every minute of every day. It's so precious. And so I now write all the banned words on the inside of my hand so that when we're having and I've had a bottle of wine or something, we're having a nice friendly discussion and somebody says something, oh, did you see that lovely dress Megan wore? And I'm like, vroom, and I have to kind of pinch myself and look at my hand and going, no. But I remember that conversation because I think because I was so truthful in my mind about it and my generation were born up on family discussions around the table and slam doors. There was an intake of breath.
Yeah.
I remember saying, but you asked me a question, you asked for a discussion. That's my opinion. Go on, give me your opinion. Yeah. But it was, I think, a bit, I just remember how shocked you all were.
Well, I think the thing is that came, if memory serves, that came at a time where, again, we'd all been through COVID. COVID really changed so many different things. You remember there was a conversation around, Black Lives Matter. There was a whole shift. We had just come out of Hockeygate, what I like to call, which was when we spoke out about hockey. So we'd received a really, really harrowing time as a result of something that someone had said. So I think what you were maybe picking up on was this sort of collision of emotions. We, the shell shock of post-COVID, all this stuff, all of our experience for those however many seasons, we probably were just like, whoa, worried for you, worried about how to react. And that's sort of like, to go back to Tommy, what you were asking about the cancel culture thing, is like, it is such a stark contrast from where we started. When we started the show, Instagram, I remember literally backstage during rehearsals, downloading Instagram onto my phone. I didn't even have it yet. Mm-hmm. And so beginning from there, I'm a new mom. I'm kind of bleary-eyed, not knowing anything. And then you fast forward these 11 seasons. I've got an 11-year-old. Our lives have changed. There's been divorces, different co-hosts, like all these different things. And this public...
It's like an arena. It's like the Colosseum in Rome.
It is.
It's the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Yeah, or throw tomatoes at you. Yeah.
That's right. And some days you have the bandwidth for it and some days you don't. And unfortunately, I do think, and I'm sure you would agree, that we've, as a society, have become so much more, and that's kind of why we started our podcast, Cynthia and Josie's Unmentionables, because even within a show like The Social, there were things where we don't either have the time to delve in. And I don't want to be clipped and then suddenly put online. And at least with a podcast, you can have a larger conversation and get into nuance. Sure. And social media, unfortunately, is this breeding ground for hot takes and judgment calls and anger. And there's no nuance.
And unqualified opinions. I welcome opinions from journalists who are bound by a set of ethics, from well-researched experts, from people who understand what they're talking about, who might have actually read the book that they're commenting on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that out there that is so frustrating because as a person who considers himself to be well-educated, well-read, a good listener, I find that there's so much talking and so little in terms of listening.
Yeah, it's too thin. But does it get you down, Cynthia? Does it Do you get saddened by
Yes.
by comments? Because I'm sure it's much heavier when you're on television than
You can't take the compliments very seriously and you can't take the criticisms. I care about what my friends and my family and respected colleagues think of something. I don't care. I can't care. And I do think you develop a bit of a callous. I remember the first time I got a mean criticism from somebody online. It was years ago now, and it was before the social. And I was so wounded. I held it for like days. Someone didn't like me on this new show. And then by the time now, it's like if someone criticizes, I actually sometimes find it humorous. And I actually will also say, I think if there's a consistent commentary that comes up time and time again, there may actually be some value in that. There may be something to look at that may have some truth. For me, it's always the only things that sting is when, for example, on the show, I've wanted to say something and I haven't, and then someone calls us out for it. It's because I know that
regret.
In my truth, it's a regret.
Yeah.
And so that's always something, again, to pay attention to. But I mean, the state of the world has gotten me down. I mean, I had a very public breakdown in the fall. And it's all of these things and a bunch more that led to that.
Right. So what was, I'm really interested in that. I'll tell you why. Because I'm sitting here in Italy and we've got a retreat on. So I've got 18 women, down by the pool at the moment. And we're kind of on day 5. And they're a real vast mixture of ages from, I would say, 28 to maybe 55. Maybe 160s, and they're half Australians and half Canadians, which is quite interesting. And of course, it doesn't make a difference whether you're 28 or whether you're 55 or 65. There's this thread of stress and breakdown and upset and how to handle it. And I've heard more stories this week. And we've got quite a lot of women your age here who are trying to handle children. And I'm interested because, I remember how hard it was because I was at the kind of real nutty part of my career when my kids were like 11, 12, 13 years old and going into that nightmare age. And I'm listening to their stories now of how
different. Is that a technical term?
Well, teenage boy, 13, 14 is not the most beautiful sight you've ever seen. But this basically, a lot of things kind of came at you at the same time. And then do you call it burnout or a breakdown? I mean, what would it be?
I mean, I feel like in a Venn diagram that would intersect, burnout, breakdown, depression, like they were all kind of coalescing at the same time. And, I consider myself kind of an upbeat person, happy, joyful. I've never had depression in my life. And so this kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And what happened was in the days leading up to me taking time off, what it looked like was me showing up to work repeatedly and not being able to get through the morning meeting without breaking down into tears. There were lots of things happening in the news that were worthy of talking about at that time. And, on our show, we're expected to come and talk about the things that people are talking about. And yet there was a lot of silence around certain things and or recognition that if we start talking about certain things, we are going to potentially open up a can of worms that we can't come back from. So there was this weightiness of the state of the world, the state of our feeds. You can remember in the fall, there was a lot of juxtaposition of images of dying babies alongside, for me, it was like a cat video. And this kind of crassness and helplessness that I think everyone was feeling at that time. But that was just sort of the snapping point where I just kept showing up to work and crying. And obviously that made me not able to do my job. But when I look back, I can see that what preceded that was a lot of rage.
Against what?
I was mad at my partner. I was mad at my son. I was mad at the state of the world. I was mad at injustices at my work, what I felt like were some corporate decisions and things going on that I didn't have control over. I was just angry, so angry at feeling helpless about so many different parts of my life. And that rage, I guess, sort of, came to a head. And I always find it kind of poetic that I was burnt up for burnout. And then the first kind of like soothing thing was tears, was water, was this, influx of endless tears. And so gratefully, my boss recognized that I needed help. And my doctor was also extremely supportive. And so I took time off. And it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I think both of you can relate to the idea of I'm a hard worker. I love my job. I have multiple jobs because I have a lot of ideas, endless ideas, things I want to do. And so sort of being prescribed to just rest was unthinkable to me in a way.
That's interesting.
And I felt guilty. I felt also, as somebody who's, written a lot like you have as well, Debbie, about pleasure and about joy and about how to kind of carve out a work-life balance. I was like, felt this sort of fraudulent kind of aspect. Like, what the fuck? How did I get here?
Yeah.
How did this happen to me?
Am I allowed to be that? Yeah.
Yeah. And what it looked like then for the first few weeks was literally me waking up in the morning. I would do a bit of yoga. I would maybe have a therapy and then cry my head off and sleep.
Wow.
And then rinse and repeat. And I mean, I can get emotional even talking about it right now, just because I remember that place. And I was very scared because I thought, I don't know, am I going to be able to come back from this?
Yeah.
And then I will also say, and maybe Debbie, you can speak to this, I felt a little bit gaslit because people kept on saying to me, oh, it's perimenopause. And and while I do think it's extremely important for people to acknowledge a stage of life that involves hormonal fluctuations, this was not that. It may have been, again, in the contributing factors list, of which there are many, it may have been a small piece that was not helpful, but it was not the problem. And I feel like women, time and time again, are, and what you're talking about with your group right now is probably, we were sold this bill of goods that you can be a woman, you can work, you can have it all, you can raise your children, you can have a great sex life. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that journey, that arc, is what somebody said this morning. This woman said, I feel like I'm spinning and I'm out of control. You're going to make me cry now. I'm out of control. And if you look at the arc of being a young woman, getting a job, meeting the guy, meeting the girl, whatever it is, having the family, you're controlling all that. You say, yes, I will marry you. You say, yes, I'll have a baby. You say, you've got a certain amount of control. And then suddenly a new baby, you can't control which the night sleep. You can't, and you're getting more and more tired. And I think a lot of people don't really fully recover. Your cells don't really recover from that pure exhaustion, but you get to the stage where you are spinning. You don't even have time to worry about your marriage because you're just too tired. But you hate this and you hate that. And then it's everything starts piling on and it comes back to control. You have to kind of list the many, many things that are making you unhappy and then saying, okay, so how do I bring the control back into that? And I read something today that I wanted to share with you, that we have, on average, every single person, about 80,000 thoughts a day. Some thoughts, most of them are either in the past or they're in the present. If they're in the past, it's this kind of shadow. If it's in the future, it's mostly fear and worry. We're all worried about our future, every single one of you. And I think, you're at a certain age where it's like putting food on the table. Then you get to a certain age like me, it's like the future. I don't know if you know who Marilyn Denis is, but she's an iconic, she was in Harry Potter, British comedian and actress. And I heard her speaking the other day and she said, she's 85 or something. She said, it's that tunnel, but there's no light at the end. You kind of know what's coming. And that's the awful feeling that as people get older, 50s, 60s, yes, you're going to have that big hurrah. And then there is no light at the end. For any of us, it's going to come to an end. But how is it going to come to an end? Is it in an old people's home? Is it alone? Which is, I think, everybody's biggest fear. And that's the other thing they're talking about here is the loneliness aspect. And Tommy and I have talked about that together and on a podcast, because for the young ones, that's crippling because they've lost the form of control on how to bring people into their life and make new friends.
Yeah, for the friend thing is huge. So it's interesting because when you're saying control, I would spin it slightly differently, which is that I think what people are searching for is a sense of freedom and spaciousness in their lives. And I don't think the way that you described that trajectory, I'm not sure that we do have the amount of control that we think we do. I think that idea of like you go through school and you get a job and then you probably find a partner and then you have a kid, that kind of script that most women have been sold, and men too to a certain degree, is is something that we didn't question. And I think what happens around your mid 40s, 50, early 50s, like, is that you kind of go, wait a minute, I did this whole thing. Did I really sign on for all this? Is this exactly what I want? Who am I? We never stopped along the way to question what it would mean to carve out a life that actually really served us, that really was a reflection of who we are, because we never stopped to ask ourselves, who am I? And so one of the first exercises that I did, again, once I was starting to collect, because immediately once I went through a period of rest, I was like, how do I fix this? How do I optimize? Everyone kept saying to me, stop trying to optimize. You just need to rest. I'm like, I got to figure this fucking thing out.
Yeah.
And so I went into, one of the most valuable things was doing a values check. And I'd never before done this, and people do this in corporations and in work situations, but it was actually a very hard exercise. And for people listening, you can just Google values and they'll find a list of like 100 things, and they're everything from the environment to...
Is it what you value?
Yeah, what you value. And you have to reduce it down to first your top 10 and then try to get it to 3. And it's hard as shit. Because you care about a lot of things, but who are you at your core? And then you have to start asking yourself, like, how, if I've narrowed it down to these 3, and maybe it's like, I most value authenticity and creativity and family. Maybe those are your 3. And how am I living my life that actually stacks up and really reflects that? Because you start to realize where you expend your time and energy. You start, again, using an app like Pomodoro or something like that. How are you spending your time? How is your day going? And this maybe goes back to the control piece, but you might find that you're not actually living in a way that reflects your values. And therein lies, I think, some people's breakdowns, beginning part. For me as well, it was about what kept on coming up is, and I think this is true for so many women I speak with, is that they felt like their intuition had been being squashed over and over and over again. And what does that mean? That they were showing up in spaces and having a feeling like, I don't actually like this person, or I don't actually like this marriage, or I don't actually like this job, but I don't feel like I can do anything about it. So squash my voice. Can't really say that in front of my boss. I'm afraid to say that because I might get in trouble. Squash. And that over a period of time creates this ball of rage like you wouldn't believe. And I think this is also a theme. Women aren't allowed to safely express their rage, their anger, their frustrations. We just have to keep on and carry on, as the Brits say. And so, I mean, I do have like a 3-step formula that I'm toying with. I don't know if you want me to share this at all.
Yeah. I think people find this really helpful.
We're just going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Yeah, this is all about the sharing of these things. And we do want to know how you came out of this, because I think all of Canada was concerned at that time. And you have done some talking about it since. So what were the 3 things?
Well, let me say, like, I feel like burnout is so unique to each and every person that there's no one script. But this dawned on me in my haze of coming out of this, that remember when we were kids and you would go and you'd do the fire prevention, and maybe it was a little bit different in Britain, Debbie, but I think, Tommy, you might remember that the fire prevention crew would come, and when you're little kids, they would say, if you're ever on fire, if you ever find yourself on fire, you have to do these 3 things. You have to stop, you have to drop, and roll. Okay. Yeah. So I applied this to at least the initial stages of burnout. Stop, meaning the first thing that you have to do, if you can, is rest. If you have a type of job where you can actually take literal time and do almost nothing, that is obviously a luxury and a privilege, but you have to take it. If you can't, then I think you have to find places in your schedule where you can rest. And I hear from people all the time saying things, I can't rest. I'm a mom of 3, or I'm a caregiver to my aging parents, or I'm doing all these different things. I guarantee you, if you start tracking your day, there are times where you scroll your phone. That is an activating activity, for example, doom scrolling,
not
as
relaxing.
they call it.
Yeah.
It's not relaxing at all. It is not restful. So what does rest look like? Taking those 15 minutes, sitting on the couch, actually trying to think of nothing. Meditation. Journaling for 15 minutes. Taking a walk around the fucking block instead of putting your hands into, like your default habit mode. So stop almost everything that you can, or finding places to truly stop and rest.
Yeah.
Second thing. Drop is what I mean by this is you have to drop your ego, this attachment to your idea of like who you think you should be in the world. I am a mother. I am a caregiver. I have to keep on going and doing this and putting myself last. I have to do this type of job in this way because it's who I am. No, drop it all. You need to get rid of it all.
You're dropping the weight of all of those things.
That's right. The weight of
You're putting it down. Yeah,
that's right. Drop it. Drop your, for one, habits. Drop your habits, or at least take a look at them. Because for me, that was a huge one too. I started realizing little things like sleep. Sleep is super important, I think, to most people. And I think this is a time where it starts to be a bit disrupted. You add wine to that for me, and for me specifically, and I would be often up at like the 3 a.m. hour. And what would I do a lot of times? I would pick up my phone and start scrolling.
Yeah.
I would know that this is a terrible thing to do, and it would make my time awake be that much longer. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to stop drinking for a month. And I am not allowed anymore to go onto my phone in the middle of the night, even if I do wake up. And so I started doing that. And lo and behold, like my sleep suddenly changed profoundly. And that impacts your mood and that impacts your joy. So that was for me. I had to take a hard look at my habits and start to readjust them, drop some of the habits, my go-to ones. I have more, but we'll stop there and I'll go to roll. And roll, what I mean is like, just like, rolling to me is like this, roll into joy, roll into thinking about playfulness, roll into humor, roll a joint, like roll spontaneity, trying things and not being so attached. Like attachments to me and clingingness. I'm really deep into Buddhist philosophy as well right now, which is that like, I feel like whenever I'm holding tightly, trying to rush through life, try to do too many things, trying to pack in my schedule too much, it is a recipe for sending me into a path towards burnout. And I can now see that. So I need to have, rolling to me is about creating space. It is creating joy. It is being lighter in general. So I hope that's a little bit helpful as a sketch pad. I mean, obviously there's so many more details of things that I've done differently as a result of this, but it's a work. Every day I have to be aware because it's easy to slide right back into these well-worn grooves.
I was going to ask you, do you think that it could ever happen to you again?
Yeah.
Oh God, Tommy, it's interesting. I feel like I got tested because my husband is away on a film shoot for the whole summer. So I'm solo parenting and juggling my work. And that was, again, a lead up factor last summer. And so this summer it was like he left and my son ended up getting sick and it was whooping cough.
Oh, yes.
He's been vaccinated for this. It's like an old timey thing that's come back.
Yeah.
And it's also known as the 100-day cough. So we were literally up every night with him coughing to the point of throwing up. It was extraordinarily alarming. And I was like, oh shit, like sleep, first thing to go. And I could feel myself getting a little bit crispy but again, that was when I went into double time of like, okay, rest, stop scheduling things, stop fucking being on your phone when you don't need to be, journal. Because what journaling also does, I do it every morning without question for at least 5 minutes, stream of consciousness, is that at a certain point, you can look back and you reveal yourself to yourself. If you don't have a therapist who can reflect you back to yourself, your shit is laid bare if you're honest in the morning with your stuff. And you can see how what did I eat yesterday? Who did I hang out with? How is my mood impacted? Like all these things intersect together and your journal will tell you the truth of it. You can't hide away from it.
Even if you look back years, because I don't do it so much now, but I used to, and I've kept them all, nice little leather diaries. And when I look back onto certain years, I was constantly worrying about family members, like she should be doing this, and this is not working, and she needs to leave him, and she needs to. And I'm like, there wasn't a single thing about me, about how I was feeling
that you were writing down.
Yeah. And I was writing down, and then I actually spoke to somebody about it and they said, you need to, and it was a pivotal change in my life, lower your expectations because you think everybody's like you can do this. If I did it, I painted houses and then I got a television show and then you can do it. And you're drumming these people constantly. And I know Oprah talks about this a lot. Your blueprint is what you've done. but other people aren't you and don't want to be you. And you have this thing of, oh, you can work this out. And I look back into some of them are years of this, of me writing down, all these people who are in my life of what they're doing wrong and what they should be doing. And I wish they would do that and they'll be happier. And I'm like, are you crazy?
Oh, I'm curious, Debbie. Wait, what do you think you were avoiding looking at in your own life during that time?
I think it was my version of stress because, I think I handled, when I look back at what I was doing, I had to find a photo the other day from like 2013. And, you go on your laptop and it was like, I did the royal wedding. I did Coronation Street. I was producing and hosting a massive show for CBC. And then the school stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm busy now. How did I do that? And I remember always being on, and, I have a great husband. So he took on a lot of shit. Without him, because I would come in and I would be peeling potatoes with like such venom. Like, could nobody make a shepherd's pie except me in my filthy overalls,
Rage.
That's rage, yeah.
Maybe I damaged my kids. I don't know, but I was on, but I had to do my motherly duties. I had to walk into the house straight off the set and start making dinner, doing the homework, doing the school projects, doing that, and then at it again the next day. And to the extent where it got to the stage where I'd be leaving for work at 6 a.m. and they'd be still partying with their friends downstairs, and I'm like, is your mother, I'd be standing there screaming at them, they'd be 17 or something with rollers in my hair and their friends looking at me absolutely terrified. But I think because in those days we didn't talk about stress and we let it out in other ways, because stress you just didn't. It was a weakness. And I do think sometimes it's gone too far because we don't, instead of whining about it, I think we need the tools. We need to listen to people like you. That's why I really wanted to, ask you these questions because like I'm listening to 18 of them telling me these stories. And the younger ones are the ones who are becoming a bit it's like a habit of the roller coaster and how upset they are and they're going from job to job to job. And I'm like, because my boss is mean. All bosses are mean. That's how you become the boss, but you have to tackle it. You have to speak up. You have to show you're good at stuff. And so there aren't the tools there. There's just the jolly old, so in a way we've come full circle of pull up your socks and get on with it. How do you compete with everybody else who's so perfect? Well, you either cry because crying's becoming a big thing on Instagram, or so we need to be individuals. We need to be our own warriors and do what you said. Work out, what is your value? What is it you really love doing? And we hear this all the time here. People say, I've worked for the bank for 20 years and I really hate it. And I sit in the car crying, going to work and everything. What do you like? Well, I love flowers. I just have always loved. I'm walking around your garden and you say, well, what if you gave up and you opened a flower shop? 3 weeks later, I'll get an email going, I left my job. I've opened a flower shop. I'm like, what? But you're just putting this seed in because they don't think they're allowed to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of work goes into it. Letting that little seed out that is saying to people, you are allowed. Because we think we're not allowed to jump from one career to the next or one job or one thing we love. And you are allowed in this day and age. That's what makes it so wonderful. And
that's what it is that so many people, again, to go back to that idea of you followed the script and suddenly you wake up and be like, I don't want to work at a bank. Who the fuck was I thinking? This was never going to work for me. And then that rage starts. And I do think people need to look at their own shit. Yes. Like if you have to look at yourself in an honest way. And again, journaling helps, therapy helps, life coaching, like you pick your thing that works for you. Insight Timer is also a free meditation app I highly recommend because meditation, people are often like, oh, I hate meditating or I'm not good at meditating. You're not supposed to be good at it. The whole thing is that it teaches you how to see your mind, that 1,000 thoughts or million thoughts a moment, how to see it jumping around and the shit that burbles up like to the surface. It's almost like you're about to go into a dream state, when there's like some stuff that comes up like, oh, I forgot about that, whatever email I have to, it's like a sieve, right?
But I think the best thing you said is, which brings all that forward is that intuition, because if you lose your intuition, because I remember sitting in a massive, massive meeting on this massive show, the last big show I did. And I had this feeling of deja vu. I've heard every conversation here. It's nothing wrong with the people in the meeting. It's me. I'm done. I've heard, I'm not excited. I'm not, and I'd been in television since I was 24, at the BBC, and this thrill of being on a set. But the minute that's gone, you start chipping away because you're just angry all the time. You're pissed off. Nothing is right. And I remember walking out of there and I just thought, I'm done. I'm really done. And I walked into those big offices and I met with Kirsten Stewart, who became the head of Twitter and now in LA and stuff. And I said to her, I can't do anymore. And she said, okay. And then I burst into tears, but I could not. I finished the contract. I did what I had to do, but I listened to my intuition because I knew I had to.
Were you terrified?
Well, I'd had the idea of what I wanted to do here. And then the other thing is, they say all over Instagram, don't listen to people knocking you. And I would say to friends, I think I want to open a retreat center, in the middle of Tuscany. And they go, oh, you can't do that. You can't even make a bed, Debbie. You can't do, and I didn't listen to them. And of course, they were the first ones who wanted to come. But I went into
they seem to have thought you would be the housekeeping staff.
Yeah, exactly. But I went into it like a bull in a china shop, which is often the way I do things, and very determined. But then you get to the stage where it's one step forward, two steps back. And then oh my God, the what ifs, what if I'd done this? What if and then the offers come in and now you're so deep in the new project, you have to turn them down. And, you think, oh God, I can't. And there's lots of self-doubt, but the excitement of the next project, the next purpose, if you will. And I think purpose is a big word for people, is so exciting, so exciting. And I've told Tommy about, I have an Irish friend who went from being a major surgeon of women's bits to being a singer. And I
love that.
And had to work out how to do it, how to give up that salary, where she would have to live. And she moved to Princeton, New Jersey. And she did it. And she's my inspiration, never earned the money that she earned in medicine, never regretted her years in medicine, but now this heart that she had all her life to sing, she's singing, it's amazing.
That brings about a good question for you, Cynthia, which is if the social, wound down or changed, or you stepped out as a host and someone else stepped into your chair, as has happened over the course of the 11 seasons there, what would be your, next big dream? Because I know this has been a dream for you, but what would be the next thing for you?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that question. But before I do, I just want to address one thing that Debbie just said, which is that I think for people listening, I think there's something so powerful about the idea of starting to plant those seeds now while you still have the job. If you're feeling like called to do something else, plant those seeds, start. And what I hear time and time again, and Debbie, I'm sure you hear the same thing, is that women who are complaining and not doing anything. And it's that spinning your wheels and still focusing all of your energy on the drama at your work or how much you hate your boss or whatever, that you're wasting all of your juice on that. So stop doing that right away. Start planting your own seeds or again, look at yourself. Is there a different lens you can bring? Could you suddenly show up to work, even if you're tired of that job, and start seeing it through it's kind of like beginner's mind. Like, are there ways that maybe you've been contributing to the bad energy in the space? So these are all questions worth asking. But Tommy, okay, so to answer what would I do? This is the hard thing. And I think you guys are the same people as me. There's no shortage of ideas. I have an idea for a fictional television show that would fucking kill. And I've been working on a treatment for that for a while. I have another book in me for sure, maybe two, working on that slowly. I also, Debbie, I would love to host wellness kind of, inspirational groups of women.
Give me the date. What do you
my God, I will come anytime. I will be on a plane to come see you. I have no fear about what will happen next. The social will end at some point. I shouldn't say die. Will end at some point. This is TV. Nothing lasts forever. We've had an incredible run. And so I'll be sad in the sense of it's a chapter ending, whether I end it or it ends. But at the same time, I really do see these endings as incredible beginnings. And I can't wait for the next adventure.
Yeah. And I think it's the dream. And a dream is a seed. It's a seed of an idea, and stick that, on a board in front of your desk or in the loo at home. And it's that, I had a picture from a magazine, I think it was in Morocco, but it had this room with arches in. And I wanted a living room with massive ancient arches, and I have it, and I looked at that picture, and I wanted, there was another picture of an old table with a red and white tablecloth under an olive tree. I got it, but I didn't know. And I was in no position financially and no position with my family to make that dream happen. When you're bone tired, and it's not the job, I think you're like me and Tommy, the minute you get those cameras come on, you're plugged in. That's the easy bit. It's the getting there, the flights, today I'm working with my publisher on the book tour, and I know I'm going to love talking to people across the country. I know I love doing that, but I just see the flights. You're on, off, and I can feel my whole body cringing of walking through airports, being so bone tired. So, but you've got to have those dreams to get you through. And so if you are at an age where you don't have the money, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids, but you can keep that dream, and the dream may change. It may adapt. Mm-hmm. It's such a private thing, a dream. It's yours. It's nobody else's. It can be as crazy or as mad or as weird or as wonderful as you want. Who cares? Who knows? And if you feel, well, okay, I'm going to adapt it to this because now I'm 10 years older and I'm a little bit more, and that's the wonder. And so when you are sitting in an airport and they're going 5-hour delay, you sit there and you go into your dream and you're like, oh, I'm going to put roses on the table every day and I'm going to do this. And that got me way, because this was before social media. So now you would pick up your phone and go look at other people's dreams. But I would sit there and go into a kind of meditative state, and so when people say they don't like to meditate or they can't, use it to go into your dreams, your wishes, your what ifs. Yeah.
I feel like, Cynthia, the three of us have something in common, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. And that is that we are optimists. And the world is hard for optimists to live in the sense that we're always railing against things that are, counterbalancing our optimism and our need to find joy and our natural inclination to look at life with a positive attitude. And then also it is a really positive thing in the sense that if you get good at the practice of accessing your optimism, you can probably get through nearly anything. And I remember there are many quotes that are similar to this by many great people, men and women alike in the world, who talk about courage. And I think, the most important thing to understand about courage is that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acknowledging that you are afraid and going through that fear anyway and finding the tools that you need, which you've illustrated so beautifully and brilliantly today, Cynthia. I think that, when you talked about social media being an aspect of the pile of things that led you to your breakdown and your need for a pause, the women on the social, because they're asked to comment on social media and to be so involved and immersed in social media, if social media is the coal mine, you are the canaries. And at that time, there was a gas leak and you fell, and I think that you're probably not used to hearing thanks for doing that. But I want to thank you because I truly think that what you do, all of you on that show, is very brave in the current climate with cancel culture and certainly in the current climate with so many really difficult things to wrestle with in world social systems and in politics and with war and famine and all these things that we're looking at, to find that optimism and to participate in those conversations bravely and with courage. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. And I think you've helped a lot of people.
Oh, thank you.
Hopefully we'll bring you another audience because we're so, especially I think my generation, because we're brought up not to talk about stuff. So we find it very hard.
What happened to you?
And but you do find it, because you don't want to let the side down. You're supposed to be jolly and fun and full of joy. And I think when somebody of your stature has the bravery to come out and say, I lost control. I think we could talk all week on this.
I know. Thank you, guys.
Yes, I know. We're going to have Cynthia back for 6 more episodes.
I will hang out with you guys anytime you ask.
Oh, well, hopefully see you in the fall when I'm over, and we'll have a good week.
I would love that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for allowing me to become less worried about you. Now I know that you're well and that you're back in action and that you have the tools to manage things moving forward and that you're sharing those with other people. I think all of this is brilliant. And I adore you.
Well, I adore you. You're going to make me weepy, but thank you guys both also for the work that you do, this podcast, also just that you bring joy into people's lives through, it matters the spaces we're in. It matters the people that we engage with. All this stuff really matters. So I admire you guys both so greatly, and I'm honored to have been on your podcast.
Thank you, my love. So we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Sounds good. Take care, you guys.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please rate us, send in a review, and make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is distributed by the Women in Media Podcast Network. Find out more at womeninmedia.network.